Good afternoon, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at property address 448 Northeast Fircrest Place here at McMinnville. I describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front of the house. We are to the left of the doorway. Under a little green valve cover box here you have a 3-inch ABS cleanout. This will be our point of access. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water's currently running. I'm going to zero out here at the base of the cleanout and off we go. That stringy thing right there, right out of the gate, just cobwebs. Those aren't roots there. Those two right there, by and large, look like cobwebs. We'll take a second look at that joint. Most of what you're looking at there is cobwebs, though. Alright, and it looks like you may have a shared line here. In these type of homes like this, shared lines are not uncommon. It's pretty normal. The other thing it could very easily be, though, basically every house out there, whether it's 100 years old or new, right before the line transitions, you'll pick up what's called a test T or a test Y connection. And we're picking that Y up right here, right before the transition joint. So we're swapping over here to 3034 PVC pipe. So far, very clean line with good flow. Great looking sewer line so far. Couple spots I want to look at as we come back out, but I mean, as far as flow and functionality go, the thing is humming along beautifully. And whoever's been living here has done a great job at keeping cooking oil and grease out of the line. It's quite a clean sewer line. I'm a big stickler on grease buildup. After 13 years of scoping sewer lines, I am honestly more concerned at this point in my career about heavy grease buildup than I am a lot of structural issues. Like, for instance, we're in a little bit of standing water here. This is going to drain out to a pretty minimal amount. Not a belly I'm going to be recommending repairs on, I can almost guarantee that. But if you are someone that's not being careful and dumping a ton of cooking oil and grease down the line, grease builds up anywhere in a sewer line, but it especially likes to do so in standing water because it cools down and hardens up and then floats to the top of the water and starts to stick to the sidewalls. And you can get some constriction. Just the same way fat gunks up your arteries, very similar. But you can end up doing, though, is you can exacerbate a very minor structural issue into something that has the potential to cause an issue. Usually, it's a culmination of grease buildup, a belly, and someone decides to flush a bowl of wipes down the line, and that's kind of the end factor of making it stick, is all that sticky grease. So, anyway, I like to point out people are doing things right here. This is a nice, clean line. We've hit the main connection here. It looks like we tie right into the manhole for this sewer line. We're going to go locate really quick while the pipe drains out, and we'll take a better look at everything as we come back. Alrighty, located the camera head. Line terminates on Northeast Fircrest. The line, just about does a dead straight shot from the clean out to the street. Almost perfectly in line with the clean out here is a manhole out in the middle of the road. The line ties directly into that manhole. Not every sewer line does a manhole connection. Like, it's about, depending on the neighborhood, about every 4th, 5th, 6th house will do that. So you've got a minor belly here that dissipates off right at the main connection at 26 feet. And it is rinky-dink tiny. I mean, that's hardly even worth talking about. It's so small. And sometimes what you end up with is a little bit of debris sitting in the manhole. What I was just about to tell you, that belly there runs from about 23 feet to 26 feet, and it's holding all of about a 1/4 inch of standing water. A belly that tiny is not even hardly worth mentioning. The only reason I do so anymore is we've had a huge amount of people come into the sewer scope world in the last few years that have no clue what they're doing, and they start recommending repairs on every little imperfection out there like it's meaningful. A belly, standing water that tiny, I mean, you'd have to flush a shoe down the toilet to clog that. A shoe won't fit through your toilet, by the way. That's a joke. So anyway, I don't even consider repairs on bellies until you have at least an inch of standing water for 5 feet with no water running at all. Even at that point, it's still nearly 100% up to the homeowner as to whether it ever manifests itself in the form of a blockage. That little stringy item hanging down there, that just appears to be a cobweb. When I follow that thing all the way to the top of the pipe there, it is so tiny, thin, and stringy. The way it's displaying itself looks like a cobweb. Roots do not generally hang straight down like that. The color of it is also wrong, too. Roots are kind of a brownish color. They flare out at the root tips, and they very rarely hang straight like that, perfectly straight. They're scraggly, they're bendy, movie things. That's not how they look. That looks like just a cobweb there that got gunked up with a little bit of water and debris is all. So the line does a little bit of a zig and a zag here. It doesn't run perfectly straight, but overall it does a relatively straight shot out. And this joint here that I was talking about, that just, as far as I can tell, the joint itself does not show any signs of being compromised. So a lot of times when roots come through a joint, even when they're teeny tiny, what you'll often get is you'll have the root sticking through, and when they're tiny it can be questionable as to whether it's a root or cobweb. The one thing that always happens immediately around the circumference, or in a little tiny circle around that root, is you will get dirt staining, groundwater and dirt staining. And when I look at these things, you've got that little bit of coloration around some of those. It's kind of a brownish red hue, but it's not originating from the pipe joint. You'll see that coloration come out of the pipe joint. In this case, all that coloration is actually stuck to the sidewall. It's not actually coming out of the pipe joint at all. So as far as I can tell here, this appears to be a closed off joint. You've got just enough of those little tiny things there. It's a really hard one to tell. You could have the very beginnings of a root intrusion here. And that's what's hard, is roots are one of those things that they're not there one day and the next day they finally make their way through. And sometimes we catch them right in their infancy when they can be very difficult to discern. A lot of what you're looking at there, the obvious white little stringy items, those are certainly cobwebs. I've cambered 24,000 sewer lines. I've cambered thousands and thousands of roots. Generally speaking, they make themselves very obvious, even to people who don't look at sewer lines very often. This one's a hard one. You've got some coloration there on some of those little stringy things at the top of the pipe. There's about 4 or 5 locations there up at the top where you could feasibly have very tiny roots trying to come through. I'm going to locate and see where this is at here. Alright, so I've located this spot. I mean, the whole entire line here is surrounded by foliage. You've got bushes and trees everywhere. I mean, you've got a different bush or tree, within a few feet of this line all the way out to the street. So roots are entirely possible in here, and the line is not very deep either. You're only about, I'm getting between, depending on how I have my locator oriented, I'm getting between 2'3" and 2'5" inches deep here. Very shallow line. And the shallower they are, the easier they are for roots to get to. And especially so when you've got a lot of them in very close proximity to the sewer line. What I would start with here, being that this looks like it might be they're kind of a condominium type setup, and these very well could be shared lines. That tie-in right there could very easily be not just a test why. It could be a tie-in for the neighbor potentially. It's hard to say. You'd have to contact the HOA on that, but the HOA may very well be responsible for all the exterior piping. I would start with that. Right now, this is so difficult to discern. I hesitate to even recommend anything on it right now. I've got my face, about as close to my screen as I can get. You've got a few there at the top of the line that look like they could potentially be some very tiny roots. It's a very hard one to tell. I have my suspicions that those are indeed roots there. I think we're just catching it right as it's begun, where it's very difficult to tell. Because you can get a very similar look when you get cobwebs that have been stuck to a particular part of the line for a long time. Over time, the moisture in the line, any gunk moving through it can run into those things and discolor them and turn them from bleached out white to all kinds of different colors. And they can start mimicking the look of roots. But the ones that I'm looking at more specifically at the top of the pipe, they look like they're actually coming out of the joint, or at least if they're cobwebs, they're stuck to the actual joint itself. They're not off to the side. So I'm going to mark this. Right now, though, it's not, if I can't pretty much guarantee what I'm saying, I'm going to hold off, especially if whatever's going on is not causing any flow issues, and even more so when you have a line like this that is very accessible. I mean, as it relates to the average sewer repair out there, 2.5 feet deep under pure dirt. There's no concrete or anything to deal with here. This is one that I'm gonna hold off on recommending repair. There's just not enough going on here to know with certainty that that's what that is. All right, I did at least put a green X marking down. It's at 2 foot 5 inches deep. So if you want to, see what a bid looks like on that, you can always see that. I mean, that's a fairly straightforward thing to do there. It's just a 2.5 foot deep hole you'd have to dig and button the joint up. That's if it is indeed roots. On stuff like this, I generally recommend you rescope at the 1 year mark. If they are indeed roots, generally speaking, in a year you're going to see some changes. Alright, I just turned the camera around there. We're looking all the way back through the foundation wall. No settling or anything going back through the foundation there. So looking good going that direction. And then everything beyond that point is exposed piping in the crawl space. The home inspector looks at that. You don't need a camera for that stuff. So right out here, just this line goes right under this bush. And if you end up doing a repair here, realistically, I'd probably get rid of this thing. If I could pick a culprit, this is probably the most likely one. Some of these bushes have very woody root systems and are just as powerful as a tree is. But there's your clean out. Right out here, just barely past the bush, there's that X marking. So right now I'm going to write it up as possible roots. I'm kind of 50-50 on it. Because there's no functionality issues at all, because of how just teeny tiny whatever that is right now, and being that it's extremely easy, so my reasoning right now for not recommending repair. There's just not enough there to confirm with certainty. We have good flow all the way out to the main lateral connection, and aside from somewhat of a question mark there at 5 feet, the rest of the line here all appears to be in good condition, intact, has great flow, very clean. Sewer line's functioning properly at this time.